So welcome back to Integral Podcast. And today I'm speaking to someone, dare I say, who I just told him off the record, and I might as well put this on record, that I feel a bit starstruck because on one level, I feel like I don't know him at all because it's the first time we're speaking. But on another level, I feel like we've known each other for lifetimes. And the only one set question in this podcast starts now, which is, who are you?
Oh man, beautiful question, Jason. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I know this is going to be a beautiful experience for both of us and for your listeners too. I'm sure because, in answering the question, because who I am is more of the intention of today, of this moment right now, rather than some stories that I believe are true or honest about myself. Um, I'm wanting to be an open vessel to unconditionally love myself and the rest of the world, and whatever flows through that, I just want to allow. So that should make for some expansive dialogue here between you and I, because I believe that both of us at the core want the same thing. And then from that core, there are a lot of discussions that we can have where we won't take things personally, where the goal will still be trying to get back to that center. And it's just about finding the most efficient or healthy or helpful or heart-centered solutions to things, and not necessarily what this guy Jason, who's clearly a beautiful and intelligent human being, or this guy
Hey.
Kale comes up with. It's like these things are just, they're formalities almost.
And beauty is within first, I feel like. And when you say heart-centered, talk to me a little bit more. What does that mean? What does it mean to live a heart-centered life?
I think that's such a good question to ask right now, because it's everything just becomes buzzwords and heart-centered to a lot of people, or unconditional love to a lot of people. It, there's a gap between um, you and this other person. So what I mean to say, I feel like this is a good way to trail into an answer, is that I believe most people think that unconditional love is between God and them, or between them and another. But if we're going to be centered in the heart, the unconditional love has to come from an understanding of self, and an understanding that we are all one. And then who you are is an expression of that heart-centeredness, that unconditional love. To me, heart-centered means trusting, more intuitive based, and fearless, authentic expressions. So they've done research on the like heart math research, where they will flash an image for people that's either scary or friendly. And before they flash the image, it's incredible, the statistics, how often the heart will know that there's going to be something scary on the other end, and then the heart rate will increase moments before the scary image. But it's almost as if the heart knows that it's not going to be a scary image. And what I found in trying to sharpen this dull mind of mine is that I will always have questions, and I will always have answers and solutions, and rising and falling in my mind, but the heart doesn't judge reality like that. The heart will make you walk fearlessly through the fire, knowing that what you really, really, really want is on the other side. And the mind will tell you to go in a different direction, will try to keep you safe, cares about your mortality, cares about your image, and all these other things that are much lesser than life or death. So heart-centered is brave, and it's love, and it doesn't judge. So I can't say that it always looks good from an outside perspective, but it's listening. It's getting Kale out of the way as much as I can. And then what that means is I can ask myself, am I making this decision because I feel that there's a lack or a sense of scarcity in me? Or is this coming from a hurt place or a trauma? Or is this decision just a hell yes. Oh my God, this is going to be everything that I've ever wanted. And it's really rooted in a feeling. Right now I'm sitting on top of a bus that I bought that my family and I are about to move into. And we're going to go full time in this thing. And I don't know what I'm doing. I've never driven a bus before. I've never demoed a bus. I've never constructed solar panels or um, bathroom or plumbing or anything like that. But when I saw the bus, I knew that this was the right thing. It was just a deep knowing and very heart centered too, because my heart is bum, 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 bum when I saw the bus. And I walked away from it like, I got up in my head and I'm like, this seems risky. This seems crazy right now. And I don't know if this is the right decision for us. We have so much that we're working on. I come back to the bus and it's just like, bum, 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 bum. Yes, you need to take this. You need to walk into it. And it's been crazy for the last 2 months trying to figure this thing out, but it's right. And at the end of the day, it's how we feel about the decisions we make. We can create schemes and senses and rules of what security is. We can ensure ourselves and go through all these different things, these games of the mind, these illusions that they delude us into feeling that we're really, really secure. But at the end of the day, if you're not aligned with your heart, you're not going to feel good. You can have all the accolades and the accomplishments and the money, and not that there's anything wrong with any of those things, but if that's not who you really are, if that's not the dream of who you were before the world really tricked you into falling into the journey that you chose. If And so if we could talk about it so many different ways, because like the ego, there's nothing wrong with the ego either.
Yeah.
But
So I literally just got off a Zoom conference about redesigning businesses, and somebody asked me, what kind of things do you design, Jason? And I gave what was like quite I thought, profound answer. And I think it just went over most of their heads, which was that there's like things to design in the B realm, like frameworks and approaches to things. There are things to design that do something like a service or a process. And there are things to design that you have, like a bus. You're designing a bus that then does something that actually also means something. That goes both ways, from be, do, have, downwards, as well to have, do, be. But when you have that congruent and aligned and integrated, then you have this like massive power. And that power comes, like, I saw your live stream that you did about the bus, and it was like, man, I don't even have a driving license yet, maybe never will, but I was like, I want to drive that bus.
yes,
So yeah, tell me
I'd
more
love to
about the
show you.
bus. Tell me more about
Yeah.
the bus. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man. It's this beautiful giant machine that has an engine that has 507,000 miles on it, and I'm imagining that it's less than halfway through its life because it starts up every time and it rides like a dream. It's got windows around the entirety of the bus except for the back, but it has a space back there for a window. So our dream is to not have any rooms in the bus. I have 2 children and 2 dogs, and we want to put the bathroom down in like the little cargo area. This is like a tour bus, like something that you pay money and sit in, and it was full of air conditioning and heating units and all these bells and whistles and fancy luxury. And I ripped all that shit out of there. I ripped everything out of it, and it's just this skeleton now. But it's like a plain canvas essentially. And my family and I have lived in a tent for months. We lived in a sedan for months. We've bounced around and vagabonded and lived on people's couches and everything. So it's a massive luxury. Like, this is going to be a studio and a play area, and sorry about that. It's going to have space for everything and a lot of view. And the goal for this is to create a more external and easier sense of sovereignty and um, community, and start where, because it's really the sense of what I'm talking about starts in your heart. And it's just so easy to get distracted because the world is just full of games that separate and create competition. So living in a bus and having that freedom to just travel the world like that is, it checks everything off for us when it comes to like the ease of lifestyle. So all the difficulties that come with moving into the bus, we already kind of have that covered, like figuring out where to get water from or where we're allowed to stay, or working with very, very little resources. We've done that with so much less. And the bus is just this big, beautiful, magnificent powerhouse of freedom and expression machine that we're just so excited to move into. And it's wild. I've never driven anything like this before. I guess I've driven U-Hauls that are like 35 feet long, and this is about 40 feet. But the bridges here, at least in Pennsylvania, are like, we just fit under this thing, like legally. It's before you would like scrape it. It's a wild thing to drive. But like you said, you don't have a license. I would teach you how to drive this in no time. And what a dream it would be to cruise around in this thing. It feels so cool.
And so, like, one of the things that has been the case in my life is that I was, and I know we're sort of in the kind of story realm, but I was kind of brought up in quite a rules-driven kind of family, right? I was growing up in a socialist Yugoslavia, and everything was like follow the rules, follow the principles of the government and all that kind of stuff. And then at the age of 14, I became a refugee, and suddenly we were sleeping rough, and we were sleeping in these kind of builders containers and things like that. And I realized that there is a way to live life from first principles. And actually, in some sense, that made me start thinking about what is the most sustainable way to live. And in some sense, maybe that was my kind of starting point towards becoming like a natural dweller in some sense. Even though I live in a house, I'm still kind of dreaming about living in a container, basically, which bus is a form of like mobile container. But talk to me a little bit more about kind of sustainable living and how you see like wholesome life.
That's awesome. Yes. I care so much about this stuff right now. I think we connected over a post that I was picking trash up. And I can kind of lead into that, and then maybe touch on the bus a little bit too, if that connects well. But it's something that I think that maybe we don't have all the answers to just yet, this sustainability and like a wholesome life. I really loved what you said. It reminds me of character being so important. I think you said living from first principles. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's like
so
what is the least amount that I need in order to just, well, both survive and there's opportunity to thrive, but with taking as little as possible.
I think that I mean that I think that we have to have a sense first. Man, I want to go down the rabbit hole with you. Can I go down the rabbit hole with you for a sec?
Absolutely, this is all about rabbit holes, brother.
Excellent.
let's
Beautiful.
let's see how many rabbits we could potentially catch. If any.
Sounds good.
They're tricky,
Yeah,
right?
right.
They're tricky.
It might be endless holes, but
Yeah.
no, I think we'll get to some form of tangibility with this. So what has been coming through me lately is that the game that we're playing right now in society is two layers. And the first layer is the illusion, and then the second layer are all these ideas and structures created around the illusion. And when I was I minored in psychology and studied psychology in college, and I love a lot of psychology. But it's to me it's like using like Maslow. I'm going to make this a post. Maslow and his hierarchy is like measuring a broken record and telling you how it's supposed to sound, but you're measuring something that's already broken. So when Maslow looks at the hierarchy of self-actualization and sees that there's these four lower solid bits of foundation that human beings need to have in order to really actualize, he's measuring based on what he sees and in that society, it was designed that way first to create a sense that we actually need a sense of self-esteem, a sense of safety and security, as if that's actually possible in any way at all. One of us, brain aneurysm, electrocution through my ears, meteor hitting me, you know, a plane, whatever, my bus exploding while I'm on top of it. These lower rungs of the ladder, the lower chakras of ours, what I've been coming to realize is that these are God-given, source-given, automatic, full right away. They already are. And in the Bible, Jesus says, let the weak say I am strong, not let the weak say I am becoming stronger or I'm capable of being stronger, because that puts a gap in between a person and where they want to be, rather than just being the wholeness of I am, or the wholeness of reality. So there are gaps between what we might believe are green and sustainable, and we're going to operate probably from a top down. So we could talk about like how much a human needs to eat. So if you look and say, see what first off, like the food pyramid, it's a total joke, and now they're kind of getting rid of that, and it's not a joke actually. It's kind of fucked up. It's kind of a thing that they designed on purpose, and they knew that they were designing something that wasn't necessarily had anything to do with nutrition, but it had to do with money. And so if we step away from the food pyramid and go, oh, now we've solved it. You know, bread and grains are not necessarily the main staple. Maybe it's veggies, or maybe it's protein based or something like that. We're still operating from this first phase of illusion, that is that we have to eat a certain way at all. And a few months ago, I started this diet called Grow a New Body, and it's a book. It's on Amazon, and the doctor slash shaman that wrote it had a brilliant and weird and awful diet for the ego. My God. But it shed everything off of me. And I went from being a guy who, I'm about like maybe 165 pounds right now, but usually about 175, 180 pounds, eating 200 plus grams of protein a day, and going down to 20 to 25 grams of protein a day max, and going from eating whatever I want, or eating mostly protein based and bread based, to completely cutting most of that out, all the bread out, all the sugar out, all the fruit out, and just eating veggies, and watching my body shift into a like more of ketosis by eating fats and stuff like that. The food bill goes down significantly. So now we know that we really don't have to eat that much. It's fun to eat, but the amount that we have to eat is so little. And then, okay, how much do you have to sleep? How much do we really need to sleep? And why do we feel that we need to sleep for 8 hours? We can minimalize so many different things if we come at it from an approach of just cleaning the slate completely. Maybe we sleep because of the emotional stress that we carry ourselves. Maybe we sleep because of our susceptibility to the other vibrations around us. Maybe it has more to do with our diet and digestion. I think it has to do with all of those things. So the bus is trying to lower our carbon footprint. I'm 99% sure I can run this thing off of vegetable oil, which would be fantastic. I want to be completely off the grid, and I want to grow our own food, hydroponic in the bus, and then get to a place where we can be smaller scale and sustainable. And the crazy thing about smaller scale is how much richer everything is. The food's richer, the communication's richer, the sense of contentment is richer when everything is purposeful in our environment. But the more we spread out, and the more we need like instant gratification, and the more we need to have our own things, like having our own vehicle even is a very funny thing to do. I mean, every house in Pennsylvania has 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 cars or whatever. And then how much are these people using these vehicles? An hour a day, you spend $60,000 for something that maybe you use an hour a day, maybe you don't even use it every single day. And that's just a wild thing. And when we start, and as we start, not when, but as we start leaning more and more into trust, the consumption is going to go down so much all the way across the board. And I'm interested in every bit of that, especially trash, especially right now with the COVID scare, or whatever we want to call that. There are so many rubber gloves and these masks that also have materials that take
Man.
thousands of years to break down.
Mm.
And it's not people's fault for littering. It's not. It's to me. I'm really a big fan of Jacques Fresco, and he says that all of human behavior is based on conditioning, and society has nobody has free will. And I would argue that a little bit, but only for the people that are saying I have free will and are doing the deep work and are turning the corner away from ego, not the people that are saying that I'm very self-aware and I work really hard on myself. But the people that are losing their egos are getting into a place where they really have some um, free will because the mind just tricks them. So this isn't about blaming people, but it's about the system that creates this stuff. We're all responsible for the consumption of technology, for plastics, for oh my gosh, the list goes on and on. But I'm fascinated with all these things, and I want to play my role to help. And I'd love to hear your take on this. But I do believe that every one of us does make a difference, but that radical change has to happen on another level. That it has to be more than just one of us. There has to be a massive movement, I think, in people's hearts. And the turtles weren't enough to get rid of plastic, but I do see that so many restaurants have switched to either no straws or paper straws. But it's like cutting off the head of the hydra because they're not hemp straws, they're paper straws. So we're still chopping down trees to have a fucking straw. I mean, and I've been
Yeah,
growing out
it's
this silly beard now. I need a straw, but I'd rather get my face messy with a smoothie than have a straw. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
yeah,
I really, really
it's
want to hear you.
some of the things like straws are an example of a thing or a widget or a gadget that I'm not sure how that came about. I can only imagine that straws were only designed for people to look sexy with a cocktail, right? And that somehow uh, percolated itself into just about every other drink, right? I was
Right.
like a regular milkshake or whatever wasn't really ever meant to be drunk with a straw, but it ended up being that way. And it's like a lot of these bad decisions became the norm, and there's nothing kind of normal about it. One thing that really peeves me, to avoid the F word and all the other words, um, is if I'm going fishing in a nearby stream, which is a tiny stream, like stream next to our house is tiny. Okay, it's like 2.5 meters wide. Okay, and then I look inside, and there's like, and it's a clean area. We're living in a very clean area, but there's very often a plastic bottle in there, some sort of tearaway plastic, all sorts
Mm.
of bits and bobs of rubbish of all sorts. That I just wonder, like, how did that even make its way there? Like the journey that that whole thing took to find its way into the tiny little stream is quite incredible. And undesigning that or changing that,
Mm.
you know, going back to the time before that existed, it is very hard when there is the kind of this uh, when you were talking about food, one thing that came to my mind was I saw this 88 episode program on YouTube about 10 years ago, something. It was called Borg Agenda, right? And it's the idea that the Borg from Star Trek, and this guy took a whole bunch of Star Trek episodes, and he was arguing how uh, basically there is an agenda of sexualizing technology, okay, making technology sexy, okay, so that we accept technology as we accept other humans, okay. And
Yeah.
in that Borg agenda, you would have future in which, for example, your burger gets 3D printed, just like in Star Trek, where the captain goes up to a 3D printer on the ship and goes, just kind of types in like a couple of numbers, and the machine prints a 3-course meal, right? But what the guy
Mm.
argues is that because the machine, every time it prints that meal, it prints it exactly the same way, the meal is missing soul food. So the notion of soul food, which you described earlier on, you cooking for yourself, you growing your own. So you have that direct connection to the origin of the ingredients. You're basically missing the soul in Star Trek in most cases. You have these like perfect humans who are acting actually even quite morally, but they don't really have soul connection. But you do have, like, occasionally you do have like a shaman, who's like a Native American who sometimes, throws his little stones and stuff, and he chants his shamanic, chants and so on. But they kind of more have him as a token shaman. And it's like, oh, let him do his little thing there, but then we go to our computers and we like key in the numbers, and the computer goes like, let's go this way.
Oh, yeah.
So talk to me about soul.
Oh my gosh, I'd love to. And I want to challenge the conversation a little bit too.
Oh, yes, please. Okay. I love a challenge.
Excellent. Okay, so since starting that diet that I tried, and I'm going to go back to it, I appear to be a healthy human being, but I can tell that I've put like 10 pounds back on. And that's because I'm eating whatever I want now. I'm honoring a different aspect of myself. And not to get into that, but I feel like it's a good example. So I think I should be in worse shape. I think that my body should technically not feel as good as I feel right now, but I feel so good right now. And I'm very, very healthy right now, despite how much I've deviated from that diet in the last few weeks. And the reason is because of the intention and the way that I eat and how I perceive what I'm eating. If you eat some ice cream and say, God, this is terrible for me, this is awful trash, and I'm a bad boy for eating it, that it's going to stick to you, just like everything else energetically sticks to you if you treat it that way. If a judgment comes up for you and you're like, shame on you, Khail, like for coming up with that awful judgment about that other person. They're just another source of divinity. How dare you? That gets processed and held on like fat, like weight, like a cancer, like a sickness. And I used to sell medical devices. I'm a pre-med major. I'm all science, biology, psychology. I was very much about the facts and the numbers and the money and the I'm very much a product of Western culture and wounded Western masculine energy. But I've changed a lot, and I've realized that the deeper truth really is intention. If we make food for the kids and we're loving on the food, the dinner is a completely different experience than if we just throw something together for them really quick. And what's beautiful too is that, like, I would challenge anybody listening to this, if they're like, yeah, you send the energy into the food, is like, who are you when you're chopping your vegetables? If you are the person that's rushing and saying, I just have to get this food in me, I just have to feed my family quick and get to the next thing, who is that person? How do they feel? And then who's the person that sits there and meticulously chops every vegetable, and he's got, some lovey music playing in the background and he's really enjoying it? Forget the idea of energy, forget the idea of God. How do you feel when you're doing that? You're a completely different person when you allow your mind to relax and you're setting an intention of good feeling, of love in that. So at the very least, it does wonders for the person in the moment, in the present. But I've seen it, and I'm a product of how we take in information, how we take in food. What I want to get to, though, that came up for me that I think is really beautiful is that I honestly, Jason, I believe that we always start with the best intentions first. And to somebody like me or you, we could probably argue that it doesn't appear to be the best intentions that some people start with. Here's a good example: this massive line painting truck that's just driving past me. It's this massive fueled chemical it's painting litter on top of more litter, which is painting lines and stripes on the road. And it's dividing and separating us from grounding on the earth. It's dividing and separating the forest from the forest and the animals from their water source. And it's repelling more things than we would even understand. But originally, the intent for that line striping machine was, what was line striping? To keep people safe and to keep people alive. The line striping machine was to fasten something or quicken something, or to keep the people safe that normally would have to get down and paint lines. And many people have been run over doing that. Absolutely. People have been run over doing everything. So one day someone comes up with a machine that does it much more efficiently, that keeps everything more safe. And the dollars make sense, because even when I was younger, I wanted to build a pyramid, not because of energy or anything like that, but because I knew that they would last forever, essentially. And I wanted to create an empire, a cap empire for my family. I don't know why I had pride in my name. I did not feel connected to my family, but I had this idea that I needed to build an empire, that I had to make so much money and such an impact on the world in that kind of way that I could build not a shrine necessarily, but like a giant safe place that for 1,000 years my family could always come back to. And my perception of that has changed so much, but my intent was good initially. And I think that the person with the straw, maybe it was, let's just believe it for fun, that it was made for paraplegics, for people that couldn't move their heads and or had a the head brace, neck brace thing on, where a straw was the only thing, or they broke their jaw and it was like, oh my gosh, we can feed them by putting a straw into their mouth. And then from there it becomes sexified, tainted with how much it can be used. And then it becomes, this luxury becomes a necessity. I know people that need to drink their drinks, particular drinks, through a straw. It has to happen that way, or they actually don't even enjoy it that well. And now we're on layers upon layers upon layers of things. And you're saying, like, you want to follow the trail of the 1,000 miles that plastic bag has floated, and got it down to a stream now. And the trail is crazy, and it's beautiful. And I feel like if we get back to the source of it and really try to connect with the source of it, that's where we can make the biggest impact. Because if we try to tell people to stop drinking out of straws, when they have this emotional and personal attachment to the straws, it's a mess. And then you go back another 100 miles or something, and it's like, well, there's really good things for straws, Khail. You don't want people that are, that broke their jaws not to be able to drink. You don't want like the person that's just trying to feed their family to work their job. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's that on the end of this, we're creating so many problems that are unnecessary. So we have to get down into the core of it, into the money systems, into the systems that are, packaging these things. Because especially with plastic, there are ways that just might be a little bit more expensive, that are so much more natural, organic, better for the environment. And we can have our cake and eat it too right now. And I think that's the beautiful thing about technology, that we don't have to scrap everything. I'm content with scrapping everything. I like I said, I lived in a tent. Like I've lived in a car by myself for months. I don't need much, but I like it. I love technology. I would have probably have never met you and connected with you had
Yeah.
we not had technology.
So what comes to mind there is a phrase, and I want to write a series of essays or maybe like talks about this, but I want to ask you a question, and it's a phrase called turbo folk. Okay, and turbo folk is something that is originates from the area where I'm originally from, that sort of Balkan sort of Serbia, really, and it's the idea that it's originally in the music realm. So you take folk music and you reproduce it using technology, and what you get is turbo folk. Okay, but the turbo folk is the notion that turbo is like an injection of extra petrol into the engine to give it like extra fast drive, and
Yes.
folk is like a native culture. So when you connect this turbo injection of technological prowess into what is classically folk, what you end up having is turbo folk. What used to be accessible at small doses, like for example, people might have done ayahuasca in jungles of Peru in confined environments in a tribe, well cared for with shamans and so on. Now there is like a turbo folk of like everyone run down to Amazon, do ayahuasca, quick in and out, like a McDonald'sization of
Yes.
ayahuasca, right? And it's like you miss out on all the goodness of like shamanic support, potentially the tribal sense of communitas or whatever they call it, right? Belonging to the tribe, being protected, being in the jungle, being in nature, listening to the song of the bird and going, that's not noise, that's actually beautiful song. It's called bird song, not bird noise. Even when the parakeet goes like that, and it's like, well, I'm
Yes.
not used to that, but that's beautiful. And so talk to me about turbo folk. What comes to you when I mention that phrase, now that I've explained it a little bit? Because
Oh my gosh.
in
Yeah.
context of the straw, right? So the turbo folk of the straw is that if the straw was designed to feed the guy with a broken neck, right, and you use it in small doses for everyone who broke their necks, you realize you probably need about 10,000 straws in the whole of USA. But
Sure.
when you put it into a McDonald's milkshake, suddenly now you need billions of those straws. And there is a
Mhm.
factory for just making straws and converting oil into raw material plastic that you can then make straws out of. And those straws cause cancer, not just in humans, but also in the fish that end up eating it. And then we eat the fish and we get even more cancer. So that's the kind of the turbo folk of the straw.
It's beautiful. I love it. And I really, what I really like is that that's this, I wanted to lean back into this because I think that I felt like I forgot to get into this part of it before you asked the turbo fault question. So it's just funny how that flows really nicely. I wanted to comment on your idea of 3D printed food takes the soul out of it, because on that level, I so agree. Because like I just said before, is that the intention behind it is so important. And um, but I want to believe, and I do believe, on my deepest depths of believing, that it 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 is all soul. And try as we may, we cannot get away from the soul, and it's all God. But obviously there's an honesty level of a let's really look here and now how it's going, when a silver spoon white collar, very rich frat guy from New York goes to Peru for 3 days to get his ayahuasca trip on. It's not going to have nearly the impact on his life that if he went there um, and stayed and didn't have a plan and allowed himself to be comfortable with that feminine energy, and not be a product of time, of constraints, of money, of what ifs, of what about all the other people that are back at home, what about all my obligations and my responsibilities. But if his responsibility was to himself and his self-discovery, and thus then his expansion and expression afterwards from a cleaned out, um, clear state of who he is, it would be completely different. So my mind is very fixated on, well, like, what's the problem in this, and what do we solve? So what I see is the problem in that is that takes this soul opportunity to really get down into the soul, is money or time, these constructs that are first taught to us that are illusions. These are the first, and then the systems on top of it. So you can't blame like Elon Musk for creating this cyborg technology where he's going to be putting these brain implants in people. You can't blame him. Yeah, I mean, you can, I guess, if you want, but I even said it on Joe Rogan's podcast. Someone else is going to do it. We can't take away guns because someone else will make them. We can't stop this train by just stopping ourselves. We have to change the system so that the train is going in a different direction, so that people start to worship themselves, their character, their expression, the nature around them, the universe, something bigger and greater than their accomplishments, their status, their name. A Cap dynasty that I was trying to create as a kid. They have to get beyond that. So, and then that's when we'll really get into the soul. But I do also see that if 3D printed food is going to be the norm for a while, but it winds up separating people from really getting that nutritional value from their food, a new tree will grow up inside of them and then start to seek the like deeper clarity and back down to the grass roots of real eating, real community, breaking bread kind of things. But why, I believe, like, why now do we really need to go through the pain and the suffering again? Or can we all just stop and talk about this stuff and say, yes, these technologies almost seem like a necessity, but can we do better before we take off in this direction? What do we have to do to really make sure that we create businesses and structures and new norms of ways of thinking, of ways of listening, of ways of experiencing that get closer to that heart center, that get closer to that soul, or that just completely fully express the soul, and we don't even have to worry about the problem with, oh, let's spray the highway with DDT to kill whatever it was, weeds or bugs or something like that, and then poison ourselves once again with technology. Technology is for us. It's our expression. It's just being used in a darker kind of way because it's money driven right now. It's not about like, what can I do? It's what can I sell? Like, I have a pair of nail clippers that thank God I bought them before like nail clippers went to what every other bit of technology is. But every bit of technology is like, it's designed to fall apart. Our phones themselves, these things could be modular, and we could take pieces off and put them together, and, oh, I need a new screen, I put a screen on. But they're really hard. They're designed not to be so modular. I guess ultimately I feel like we need to get down to the deepest depths that people are comfortable with right now and make the change from there. How does all that strike
Well,
you?
all that goes back to first principles living, because I'm a designer
Yes.
myself, and there is the idea of atomic design, and this is something actually that Elon Musk talks about all the time, first principles. And somebody would say, well, is it harder to make a car or software for a car? And he would say it's harder to make a car because there's more atoms that you need to move. And so when you take it as an atomic design from first principles, then you start realizing, hold on a second, this all costs energetic units, right? Forget money and all that stuff. It's energy. And, if emotion is energy in motion, if we go with that definition, then it's all taken emotion to produce. Literally, emotion is production engine in the universe, because it's energy in motion. And the bigger things we want to make, the more emotion we need to put into it. And perhaps that's why we find that, yes, we can build machines, even the ones that are drawing lines on the what's it called, the road, but it's very hard to build a machine that can operate itself. And theoretically, it's impossible to do that, because that decision making, the machine is lacking the ability to have an intent and make decisions, because there's so many, actually infinity options that we can
Variables.
take at any
Yeah.
point in time, including right now. What are we talking about? Like, we don't really know. Like, it just emerges. Imagine having a machine that can actually handle this completely, from the soul conversation. So there is a kind of point at which, machines and toolkits and tools have their purpose achieved and completed and fulfilled, and then you kind of leave it to humans or living life, which is in some sort of way the highest order technology known in the universe, to kind of continue its life journey without the Borg agenda going like, I will take over you, right? And so I think that's a big, there it goes, look at that beautifully, perfectly straight line. which nature never creates, right? So it's like let it wave, let it be wavy, as opposed to straight line. But there is use for a straight line, as you said, but nature creates curves for a reason, because we find curves more attractive usually.
That's right. They're easier on the eyes, as we say, and it's all about it. Like the guy going to Peru, if it was curvy, if it was okay, if it was able to be loose. Like I was just talking to a new client of mine, and we were talking about how when you really want to give yourself to somebody else, you can't have a 1 hour set call, because it might be 5 minutes, but it might be 6 hours of unfolding and climbing the ladder and falling and rising. And if you really really want to help somebody, you have to be open to the divine just working through you, and whatever comes up to allow, rather than trying to straight line, hard cut every little thing. Jason, I'm really curious, could you expand a little bit on that energy? Like, because I'm very familiar, energy emotion. Joe Dispenza really loves using that term, and I see it in a very personal, personified, small level. But I feel like you're opening something for me when you describe the invention or the creation of something as requiring more energy, more emotion, maybe more human attention to create something like that. Could you have like maybe a deeper example? Or
Okay, so I'm also a scientist, and I loved maths and still love maths, and computer programming, which is based on maths and logics and algebra and all that stuff. And but I never really liked physics that much, because when physics came in, it was like suddenly I had to kind of really think about the way the world works. But I know enough of physics to know that I think it's first or second law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created. It can only be converted from one form to the other. So if I'm looking to build a coffee mug, well, I'm going to have to take a bunch of atoms, which are a form of energy, let's say at some kind of higher order of existence, or lower order of existence than the kind of pure just isness, let's say. And I'm going to have to take a bunch of those atoms, blend them through some sort of machinery and process, convert them from what is perhaps clay to start off with into some sort of baked clay, which this is a lot more kind of, solid thing. So it doesn't kind of, it doesn't just kind of dissolve when I pour coffee into it. Then there is a bunch of paint on it and all that stuff. There's a whole bunch of machinery that had to apply a lot of energy to make this cup. And a lot of atoms got moved for that. And maybe when that was being made, when these were being made by somebody, like by hand, similar to that soul food, the maker of the cup would have been some sort of like akin. Often the time nowadays you see like Japanese woodworkers, and they're making things out of wood, maybe like a chessboard or things like that. And that chessboard might take 6 months to make one. And the reason why it's really valuable is usually because it's a one-off piece, and that Japanese highly skilled, masterful worker who learned that craft over 40 years put 6 months of his life and painstaking work into making that chessboard. It's a one-off unique piece, original make, and so on. And so you're putting a lot more emotion into making that chessboard than if some sort of machine just kind of goes done, right? And it makes like trillions of those, and then you kind of you can sense from it. Usually, you can sense, oh well, this particular chessboard is a bit naff. It's a disposable thing. It's a turbo folk chessboard, as opposed to the one that the Japanese woodcrafting specialist that he made it, and you want to give it to your grandchildren, not just children, but grandchildren, and make sure that they recognize the value of it to pass it on to their children and really play chess, because ultimately the reason why that was crafted so well is that they could play chess and really enjoy moving every piece. And when you win a piece, you kind of sense the soul of the Japanese craftsman who made that thing, right? In fact, the story of chess, origin of chess as a game, not that I even really promote it as a game. I play it quite a bit, but it's a sort of like a win-lose game, right? It's a zero-sum game. But the origin of chess apparently is that it was made over a long, long period of time where two emperors were sending each other pieces that they were making, and over time these pieces were getting assembled into what became chess, right?
Wow.
But they were kind of co-designing the chess game from two opposing enemy sides, and they created this timeless game that people still play today. And I have like an 8-year-old daughter, and she still plays with me, and she's like really keen to know what's the best sort of sequence to follow up with a knight behind the pawn and all that stuff. So that's what energy in motion is. And even if you're getting machines to build cars, let's say like Elon Musk, he talks about, we need to spend a lot more time to design the machine that builds the machines. So they'll spend like 4 years designing and training a robot that can then automatically assemble cars, because it takes a lot of mining the human mind and thinking and emotions and thought, energy, and all this stuff to program that into a robot that then can go yeah, in the most optimal way as well, so that you don't have to move so many atoms around, so that you don't have to destroy the planet while you're making a bunch of cars.
Beautiful. Really cool. I love it. And I think that like the emotion and the intent behind handcrafted and heart-centered products, it spreads because of the perception of the value of the item. But there are lots of people out there that have these chessboards that, in fact, I'd probably argue that most of the people that have those chessboards don't appreciate them, because they are expensive, and they buy the expensive stuff because they can, and that's a status symbol for them. But there definitely are people out there that love chess, that care about it, that buy it for that. Yeah,
that would be an example of turbo folk, where people just buy stuff for the sake of just owning the piece and not really appreciating using it. Because I was famously, like, the documentary came out where like Michael Jackson was going out shopping, and he was just pointing to these like super, and even like he was actually buying chessboards weirdly, but there's chessboards that costed like $150,000, and he would go into a shop and just point and go, we'll have this one, we'll have this one, we'll have this one, and buys like 7 chessboards that cost cumulatively like $1 million. And he probably doesn't even know how to play chess. He's just buying them out of this sort of like emptiness. He is sort of like, even though he's been like a very soulful artist and he knows how to perform soulfully, in many respects he's kind of being like de-souled, and what he's looking to do is like fill the void of his own emptiness through buying things that he doesn't even have time to appreciate through using them. Because what's the point of owning like an amazing chessboard from a grandmaster who made it if you're never ever going to play a game of chess with it? It's just pointless. It's turbo folk. That's turbo folk. It's just I'm having it just because I can. Yeah.
Or that I feel that I must need it, or I need my own because I'll play it once. Or what came up for me too is then how technology is another beautiful thing when it comes to this particular need, at least on the environment, because we can play chess on our phones, download an app in 30 seconds and probably figure out how to play it right over Zoom or something like that. And that's better for the environment, better for the world, and better on our egos when we realize, God, I spent $150,000 on that chessboard and I haven't played it in 6 years or something like that. It's easier if it's just like, well, maybe I'm not putting this much attention in. And maybe when we're not putting that much attention in, we might see that there's a void in our hearts. Maybe not. But another thing that came up, really beautiful, Jason, I love listening to you speak. This idea can't be about creating a system that turns our values in the right, quote unquote, right direction. But it has to be about loving people where they are right now and loving that hole that's fictitiously placed in our hearts from a very, very young age. That loving the whole being beyond this idea that there is something that needs to be satisfied, needs to be filled. Like my comment about eating is fun. It's there's a thing inside Kale's body that's going, oh, I gotta, in my mind, I gotta shove it in my face, I gotta put it in my pockets, I gotta fill my house up with it. And that's the thing that really needs attention and love more than anything. And our systems will help, whatever we create, and our products will help get us in that direction. But we need healing, deep healing.
Yeah, there is an element of, I think ego can be utilized a lot for the powerful aspects. You know, sometimes, you know this with like making the bus, right? You need a lot of like muscle power to maybe sand down the bit of the rusty thing and then repaint it and so on. And just like the muscle power is ego, right? And so I remember when I was working as a builder at the age of 16, I would eat 6-7 times a day because I was digging all these trenches and carrying these like roofing tiles up to the roof, and they're like 25 kilos each, and I'm carrying it, and then if I drop it I'm going to kill someone, so I can't drop it, and my arms are burning, you know, like, oh god, like you know, but I was like built like a brick. And then every 2 hours I would have a sandwich. Usually I'm not a fan of sandwiches, but when you're super tired, when you really worked out, that sandwich, gosh, it tastes like, oh my God, this is like the most beautiful thing I'm having. And you know why? Because you've actually exercised your ego in the direction that's actually of sort of value add. And you've moved that energy in the direction of some sort of purposefulness. And then when you are taking a rest or eating, you can appreciate it more because you've been on the other side. That's sort of like almost not so enemy side, but the opposite end of like the struggle and being hungry and running out of energy, what you perceive as, and you can really appreciate that sandwich, even though in other cases, oh, it's just a sandwich, I need something cooked, or I need something different, or whatever, you know.
So the ego is the body. Yeah.
Well, yeah, ego would be something like the power drive, right? It's and soul and heart is would be like, in the purest sense, heart is like the sensing center, sensitivity, emotions, and then soul would be like the being realm. Like, who am I is soul, heart is what do I feel like, and the ego is like, let's go, champ.
I love it.
So there's all of that is good stuff.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff, right? You can do with all of it, but if you misuse it, you know, it ends up going like haywire.
Absolutely. I think of like anger and aggression misused obviously hurts people and hurts yourself, and maybe causes embarrassment, or you say things you don't mean to say, but you can shift that energy into more of assertion, which is kind of like what you're talking about, going up and down those stairs. It's funny, I did similar work carrying tiles up hotel flights of steps, and or buckets of water or whatever, and it's like you get that aggressive attitude, and you use that attitude, you know, you put it in its place. It's exactly where it really wants to be. It doesn't want to be screaming around the kids. It wants to be up those steps, and you're so satisfied after that. And
I have a boxing bag in the back of our garden. You know, I have a 13-year-old son who sometimes kind of comes up with a kind of like aggressive energy, and I said, look, dude, the boxing bag is right there. You know, it can take so much punishment. It's crazy, right? You can unleash all your anger at it, and it's not going to chat back at all. And it's like, okay, yeah. So I take him there, and guess how much he can hit? He hits it like 3-4 times, and suddenly it's like all this like, it goes down to like, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Well, so, you know, it's always there, right? It's always there available to you. there are other ways in which you can utilize that anger. Like I've got a whole bunch of gardening work that needs doing, right? That's like requires muscle, requires repetition, requires like a boring, straightforward thing. Doesn't require much even mind, brain energy. It's just like, just
Sure.
let's go, champ, put the muscle in. And it's like, it is like, oh no, I don't want, it's like, well, don't exercise that anger into the household, you know, like having to go at your sister or whatever, because it's not meant to be used like that.
Right. And it's, we're not really as a whole in humanity, not really at a place where we can be a punching bag and just go back to being still after somebody unleashes
Yeah.
anger on us. It's
Yeah.
hard to turn the other cheek.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the difference between power versus force. Power is beautiful. Forcing things, especially onto other people, is quite terrible. And frankly, a bit naff, really.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
It's stupid. There's no force in nature. Although we'd say force of nature. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a glacier isn't forcing itself to cut a mountain in half.
Gliding. It's gliding.
It's gliding. Yeah, it's falling. It's like the earth is beckoning for the glacier to come to the center. It's come on, wait, come down here. Gravity is begging for it.
Yeah.
It's allowing it.
Oh, my brother, listen, I usually I practice this practice of not expecting anything. Okay. So I look to cut all my expectations, because then it's really easy to outdo them, because there's nothing to start off with. But this conversation was like beyond any, even if I had set it up to this expectation level, it's gone off the Richter scale. So like I must say on record that I absolutely love and adore you and respect you. And I'm definitely going to be keeping a very close eye on the bus project and generally your development. You know, you're just a beautiful, beautiful superhuman, basically. Just tell everyone, like, you know, who you're looking for, what you do, and how people can find you, please.
Wow, Jason, my God, what a beautiful, beautiful thing to say to me. Thank you. I'm a guy sitting on a bus as the line striper is probably going to come by. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, like one more stripe. Hey, we like got the whole road done. Like the guy is got the whole road done while we're having like a podcast recording.
He's going to do it one more time too. They're doing the white stripes on the outside 3 times. Yeah, you'll have the whole road done by the end of it.
Hey.
Yeah, my gosh, thank you. And the feelings are mutual. It's beautiful. I'd love to connect again. And when I get my podcast up and running, I'd love to have you on there as well. What am I doing right now? I'm helping whoever's ready to get really, really down to the subfloor and the rusty skeleton of the bus that they are. I've helped people cure themselves. This is a tough word to use in today's society, but they have the power to bring it back, I'm sure, if they want. But cure themselves of chronic panic attacks and all a gambit of mental and physical disorders like epilepsy and fibromyalgia and insomnia and things like that, all through breath work and shifting their beliefs. But in doing that, I was focusing so much on helping people get away from these problems. It wasn't enough. It was, to me, it was like half of the understanding. And now I really just want to be a space and help people cultivate that space within themselves of just divinely and shamelessly expressing themselves. And what that looks like, unconditional love is a very sharp sword that cuts through everything that isn't truth, and it accepts and allows everything. It's God, it's true nature, it's both the cheetah and the gazelle. And I want to create a space for that in people's hearts that's already there. Really, what I want to help them do is wash away the fog on their lens. And I want to do that in myself too, because I'm not floating or walking on water today yet. But I want to create a community that its principles and its structure are designed around that there are only solutions, that there's only growth, and that there's only acceptance in climbing the ladder, and that we hold space or give space or do whatever we have to do to get a sense of what real humanity can look like on this planet. So the bus, I think, will eventually take me there, but I'm not solidified in any of my projects just yet. I want to be loose, whether it's land that comes next or it's individuals or groups or communities that I help. I'm wide open to anybody that feels like I've resonated with them out there. They can find me at khailkapp.com or on Facebook at Khail Kapp, which is KhailKapp. They can email me at breathe@khailkapp.com. But I hope to soon have some more content that represents these things. We've just been approved for our nonprofit, which is called Cultivating Consciousness, and that's the direction that I think that I'd like to go right now. But we'll see where the universe takes me.
Fantastic, my brother. As I said, I love you very much, and
I love you.
keep the beautiful work, man. And massive hugs to your family, and
Same to you.
peace, love, happiness, joy.
Likewise, my brother.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
All right.
Well received. Well
Cheers.
received.
Cheers.
Cheers. Peace.